Hello, everyone. There has been a lot of movement in Congress, especially the House of Representatives, with various allies of our community introducing amendments to basically hold accountable Azerbaijan since the war last year against Artsakh. One of the biggest proponents on these issues is, of course, our friend, Representative Adam Schiff, who's joining me today to discuss some of these important issues that are up for discussion, and some of them have actually passed. Welcome, Congressman Schiff. It's good to have you again here, as always. I want to just jump in because I know you're pressed for time. On Friday, it was announced that you had proposed an amendment to the intelligence appropriations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and Ara, it's very good to see you. Appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you again. In the Intelligence Committee, every year we take up a authorization act to authorize the work of the different intelligence agencies to set out new requirements, to make sure they're appropriately funded. And I included language in that bill to require that our committee be briefed on the propensity for new violence in the region, to try to give us some warning, if that's possible, about another outbreak of war. I'm very concerned about continued Azeri violence along the line of contact, with yet another shooting just within the last week or so. And so regularly I've been turning to the intelligence community to keep the Congress and in particular our committee fully informed of what it's seeing, so that as policymakers we can be prepared to act.
And there have also been amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act regarding compelling Azerbaijan to release prisoners of war and compelling the administration to essentially cut aid to Azerbaijan. How significant is that, and how do you think that will move forward when the entire bill is kind of discussed and addressed?
That's exactly right. I introduced language along with Tony Cardenas, my neighbor in Congress, to demand that the Azerbaijan government immediately release these prisoners of war. We want those responsible for committing war crimes held accountable. And that language passed in the US defense bill on a very bipartisan basis. And so I think it's part of an important effort to ramp up pressure on Azerbaijan to continue to call attention to Azerbaijan's captivity of these POWs, its violations of the law, the serious allegations of torture and assault. So it is part of that continued drumbeat, because if we fall silent, then we're not going to get action. And preceding that, through the leadership of Frank Pallone, we offered language in the appropriations bill to cut off funding, military funding for Azerbaijan. There's a provision that I'm trying to amend in the Freedom Support Act that calls on the State Department not to fund Azerbaijan when they commit human rights abuses. And they've been obviously doing that with great devastation. But nonetheless, there's a national security waiver that the administration has been using, and this is not the first administration to do so, to allow it to waive that finding that it's supposed to make about human rights before any money goes out. And so I'm also working on legislation to narrow that provision so that there's much less discretion for the State Department, the administration, or any administration to send military support to a human rights abusing government.
Mm-hmm. Recently, actually last couple of weeks ago, on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, the foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan met with the mediation of the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs. And they talked about a possible meeting between Prime Minister Nigol Pashinyan and President Ilham Aliyev. Where do you think this is going? Because the noise we're hearing from Baku is that this meeting is, basically filtered with all sorts of preconditions. How do you think this whole thing will play out?
Well, I would hope that this is a sign that the Minsk group is becoming re-engaged in the region. Many of us warned that if they didn't engage, we could have just the kind of conflict erupt that we did see take place beginning a year ago. And so I'm glad to see that they're encouraging a dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I'm not surprised that Azerbaijan and Aliyev would try to exploit the willingness of the Prime Minister Pashinyan to meet and try to resolve differences. I think we need to make sure that the Minsk group applies pressure to make sure that there are not preconditions set by Baku that would make any meeting fruitless. I think the sign of engagement by the OSCE is positive. I leave it to Prime Minister Pashinyan to determine whether the conditions are ripe or not. But I want to make sure that the United States, through this Minsk group, is deeply involved in trying to resolve these differences. That agreement that was imposed on Armenia and Artsakh through the barrel of a gun is not an agreement that is a lasting settlement. And there can be further outbreaks of violence if there's not a determined effort to get to yes on these important status issues.
Forgive at least my skepticism about the Minsk group and the co-chairs. We had in August 2020, Ilham Aliyev essentially saying that the Minsk group is worthless, they haven't done anything. And then a few weeks later, the attack happened. And we also kind of, at least I, from a reporter's perspective, observed that the Minsk group co-chairs, the United States and France, just basically had Russia in the driver's seat. And then we saw what's happened. What are the kind of guarantees that this time around, there'll be more engagement by the US and France in ensuring that Armenia is not left alone? Because right now, Armenia is in a chokehold. From the west, it's Turkey. From the east, it's Azerbaijan. There are the whole fissures happening right now with Iran that have raised tensions between Tehran and Baku. And of course, Russia has its own agenda. So how do we move forward? And is this a new page that the Minsk group co-chairs will be opening, at least from a US perspective?
Well, I think you're justified in having a healthy skepticism. The track record of OSCE is Minsk group is not particularly encouraging at all. I do think, though, I guess I would differ on one point. Russia has a weaker voice in the Minsk group than it does if it's just Russia and Turkey dividing the spoils in Artsakh and Armenia, and the US as a passive, stander by. So I think that the Minsk group is the right forum. We have to make sure that it's meaningful and that at least insofar as our participation and France's, that we call out responsible parties when they break the peace. The failure of the Minsk group to, and frankly, our prior administrations to call out Azerbaijan on its violence was an encouragement to Azerbaijan. This long preceded the war, and I think that failure just strengthened Aliyev's conviction that he could go to war without paying much of a price. So your skepticism is well placed. I think those of us in Congress need to keep the pressure on our administration, to keep the pressure on the Minsk group, to play a leadership role, to be engaged and help bring about a peaceful resolution.
And right now, we're also seeing another wave of rapprochement between Ankara and Yerevan. And U.S. ambassador in Armenia has said that the U.S. would like to facilitate that type of a dialogue. How realistic is that, in your opinion, given that Erdogan has already placed the precondition that Armenia should recognize Azerbaijan and relinquish any say in Artsakh in general? How realistic do you think this new discussion will be?
It's very hard to say. Erdogan is dismantling the very few checks on his power remaining in Turkey, and is moving that country on a very autocratic path. So it's pretty much subject to his whim at this point. And what his whim is at the moment, it's very hard to say. And of course, it's not much to rely on. I do think one thing is telling, though, and that is for those that for years opposed recognition of the Armenian genocide, saying that it would irrevocably poison relations between the U.S. and Turkey, or injure any chance between Turkey and Armenia of reaching some kind of rapprochement. They were clearly wrong, those voices of opposition to recognition. Because now that we have recognized the genocide in Congress, and the President of the United States has, we can see that far from it resulting in a cataclysm in the region or between the U.S. and Turkey, no such thing happened. And so it is, I think, instructive to us in the United States, or it should be, that our interests are always served when we champion human rights, when we speak truth to power, when we're honest about history, including and especially genocide. So I think we should take stock of the fact that we did achieve something we've been trying for decades with recognition, and we proved all the naysayers wrong, because the world did not come to an end when we recognized the truth.
And certainly your role in pushing this issue for more than 2 decades had its impact in the eventual recognition of the genocide. And I want to kind of take the championing of the human rights aspect, because what other human rights needs to be violated for the United States to actually take a position on what's happening with Baku and its daily threats against Armenia? Aliyev gets on a television channel and says, well, we taught them a lesson last year, we're ready to do that again. Is that not a violation of human rights, and does that not ring alarm bells in some far corner in the State Department for the US to react?
Well, the human rights violations in Azerbaijan and towards Armenian prisoners of war, I think, are legion. The bellicose statements of Aliyev are dangerous. And I think it's really important for the administration and members of Congress to condemn them, because it could pave the way for another outbreak of war and bloodshed. So I think it's just more irresponsible, dangerous bellicosity from this autocrat in Baku. And I would hope that the US and the OSCE Minsk group would push back hard.
Mm-hmm. The United States has been talking about that the status of Nagorno-Karabakh has not been established, and it's hoping that the Minsk group co-chairs will play a role. Baku is saying that the conflict is over, and certainly President Putin has not minced words by saying, oh, let's look to the future and not the past. What do we hope to achieve in a status discussion if it ever takes place?
Well, I would hope that we would cover the panoply of issues, and that basically the ceasefire agreement will not be controlling in any way. That was merely a way to end the violence, but it is not a preview of what a final resolution ought to be. I think that the Minsk group really needs to chart the pathway to how we get to a peaceful resolution of all of the issues. From my point of view, the democratic aspirations, the self-determination of the people of Artsakh ought to be recognized by the United States. But I would like to see on an international basis an effort to resolve all of the outstanding issues and find a peaceful path forward.
And until then, all sides are essentially bound to this November 9th statement, and at least the Armenian government has begun, from my perspective, surrendering not just territory, but a little bit of its sovereignty as well. How about this, incursion into Armenia's sovereign borders by Azerbaijan? They've been camped out there for now 5 months, and there doesn't seem to be, as you say, calling the perpetrator out. When will that happen, in your opinion?
Well, it's a good question, and I don't know the answer to when the administration or international community will push back on what Azerbaijan is doing and what they're occupying, the continued detention of these prisoners. But I do know this: unless we are pushing back, unless we are calling attention to these issues, Azerbaijan is just going to feel encouraged to do more. Mm-hmm. And so the attention you're calling to it, and we are in Congress, I think is really important.
And I think the amendments and the vigor with which you and the other members of Congress have addressed this issue is certainly something that hopefully the administration will listen to. Where do these bills go now? Where are we in the process of these bills?
And Ara, I'll probably have to jump off after this, but
sure.
In terms of where they are, the defense bill has passed the House. It will need to pass the Senate. That's the bill that carries the language demanding the release of the POWs. The appropriations bill, we passed a continuing resolution, which means we couldn't come to agreement on all the appropriations provisions. So the continuing resolution takes us through, I think, the end of December. So we will hopefully take up an appropriations bill and get that passed with that language in it sometime thereafter. And then we'll continue in terms of the Intelligence Authorization Act, hoping to get the Senate to pass a version and go to conference so we can have that language take effect as well.
Before you jump off, any final thoughts?
No, but I just, again, appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you today and the opportunity to talk about these important issues.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Congressman. Hope we'll catch up soon. Good luck.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Ara.
Take care.